What you're watching is a clip from Charlie Chaplin's The Kid, one of the first major feature films to contain elements of what would later become the coming-of-age genre. In the century since The Kid's release, growing up has been a near-constant theme in popular cinema from all across the globe, because it's an experience that is shared by all people. My name is Tyler Ward. Join me as I explore how the transition from childhood to adulthood has been portrayed throughout the history of cinema on this episode of Tyler Talks Film. After The Kid made Jackie Coogan the first child star, Hollywood began searching for America's next little darling. This gave rise to performers like Shirley Temple, who became a national sensation.
Lions and tigers watching me.
Many of these early coming-of-age films were literary adaptations, designed to provide audiences with a lighthearted distraction from the misery of the Great Depression.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
Over the next couple of decades, the coming-of-age genre would more or less fall to the wayside in America, but internationally, some of the greatest films about childhood would be made during this time. Italian neorealism, New Indian cinema, and the French New Wave are all movements that would be established and popularized by coming-of-age films. Compared to these masterpieces of foreign cinema, many of the teen films that became popular stateside in the 1950s seem superficial. One exception, however, was Rebel Without a Cause, a melodrama that is admittedly elevated by the breakout performance of its young star, James Dean. With his tragic death, Dean's career would be cut short after appearing in just 3 films, but during that time, he became a pop culture sensation and a symbol of rebellion against the conservative culture that had settled into American suburbs in the wake of World War II. The new Hollywood movement of the 1960s and 70s isn't especially well known for coming-of-age movies, but there were a few films that struck a chord with young audiences of the time. The Graduate and Harold and Maude, directed by Mike Nichols and Hal Ashby respectively, featured music that young people actually listened to, and focused on themes of existential isolation that were shared by a generation of Americans disillusioned by the Vietnam War. By contrast, George Lucas's American Graffiti is perhaps the earliest example of the nostalgic coming-of-age film that looked back fondly on days bygone. Despite these differences, all of these films would be lasting influences on the teen films that would follow in the decades to come.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
When most audiences are asked to name the quintessential coming-of-age movie, chances are pretty good that they would choose one of the number of hits that were written, directed, or produced by John Hughes during the 1980s. The Breakfast Club is just one of his movies that are now considered classics, even if they don't necessarily resonate with young audiences today. That's not to say, however, that all coming-of-age films from the 1980s have aged poorly. For example, Stand By Me blends nostalgia, drama, and humor seamlessly into one of the most moving American films ever made about childhood.
Suck my fat one, you cheap dime store hood.
With the democratization of the filmmaking process in the 1990s, the diversification of the coming-of-age genre followed swiftly. There was a slew of stories from black filmmakers about growing up in cultures rarely, if ever, captured on film before. The 1990s also allowed queer filmmakers to make daring and explicit films about the experiences of queer youth. Also among the coming-of-age films of this time was one of the defining films of the American indie movement, Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused. Depicting a cynicism that encapsulated the Gen X experience, the film enjoys a massive cult following today and is known for one endlessly quotable catchphrase.
Alright, alright, alright.
For all of the strides taken forward in diversity and representation in coming-of-age film in the 1990s and early 2000s, mainstream movies took a major step back in these respects over the next several years. While many of these films are enjoyable enough, they are more or less interchangeable, and tend to focus on white suburban kids, only featuring people of color and queer characters in token roles. Even the most celebrated coming-of-age film of this period, Mean Girls, falls into these tropes. Its saving grace is the incredibly witty script by Tina Fey.
You go, Glen Coco.
Since the mid-2010s, however, the coming-of-age movie has made a comeback in a big way, fueled by changing social norms and the digital revolution. Stories told from the perspective of girls took a candid and thoughtful turn, while other films portrayed growing up in poverty or abusive households like never before. The black coming-of-age experience was captured for a new generation, and queer perspectives were brought to mainstream audiences for the first time. We even have films that explore what it's like to be queer and a person of color. As it continues to become easier for anybody to pick up a camera and make a movie, we will continue to see empathetic stories about growing up from unique perspectives hit theaters and streaming platforms. As the genre continues to evolve over the coming years, it should only become more obvious that we are truly living in a golden age of coming-of-age cinema.